Okay, so last time we read scene 1. And what are some of the important things that we learned in scene 1? You can close your computer and get out your stuff. What did we learn in scene 1? Okay, so the Capulets and the Montagues have been fighting for a long time. What else happens? What does the prince say? We wrote this down in our summary that we wrote together. Yep. If they keep fighting, they'll be put to death. And then we learn that Romeo is all sad and bent out of shape because why?
Oh, because this girl loves him.
Good. There's a girl that he's in love with. It's not Juliet, but there's a girl that he is in love with who does not love him back. Okay. We also meet Tybalt. You remember Tybalt is the angry, aggressive fighter, and we meet Benvolio, who's like the peacemaker. So they will come back up in the later scenes that we're going to do today. So we're going to start on scene 2 today. So scene 2 starts on page 1046. It takes place on a street near the Capulet house. And in this scene, we are going to see Lord Capulet and Paris talking. Paris is a relative of the prince, so he's like a nobleman, probably like they call him the Count Paris, so that is who he is. Hi. Okay, thanks. What page did you say? 1056? 46. I knew there was a 6 in there. 1046. Towards the bottom. Okay, I'm going to have to get us. Yeah, you can go ahead and go.
Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet.
Also, my noble uncle, do you know that when she dies, with beauty dies her store? Then she hath sworn that she will still live. Any mind being one may stand.
Okay,
But
here we go.
Montague is bound as well as I in penalty alike, and 'tis not hard, I think, for men so old as we to keep the peace.
Of honorable reckoning on you both, and pity 'tis you lived at heart so long. But now, my lord, what say you to my suit?
But say more what I have said before, my child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her right to be a bride.
Younger than she, our happy mother's maid.
And too soon marred are those so early made. The earth has swallowed all my hopes, but she is the hopeful lady of my earth. But woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. My will to her consent is but a part. And she agreed within her scope of choice lies my consent in fair according voice.
Okay, let's stop there. So what are they talking about? Paris says, what say you to my suit? So what does Paris want here?
Oh, he wants to marry Juliet.
Good, he wants to marry Juliet, okay? So he's like a nobleman, like we mentioned the other day. You know, you really didn't like date in this time period. It was more like, kind of like this. You arranged it with a girl's father. So how old is Juliet? 14. Not 14. She hath not seen the change of 14 years, so she's 13, okay? So that feels yucky in our current time, right? They're talking about a 13-year-old getting married. In this time period, it was very common for girls to marry at 12, 13, 14. Partly because lifespan was very short back then, right? You didn't live to be 70 and 80 years old very often. It was more like 40s and 50s that people died, so they got married younger. Women often died in childbirth, so it was more common for women to get married very young. Basically, as soon as you were physically able to bear children, you would be married off, especially in noble families. So although it seems like weird and gross to us, and it was weird and gross back then too, to be honest, but it's just what they did back then. So she's 13, and Paris is asking Lord Capulet to let him marry her. And what does Lord Capulet say? He says it's too soon, right? He says, my child is yet a stranger in the world. He wants to wait a couple of summers, so he wants to wait a couple years. And then what else does he want Paris to do? In line 16. But woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. My will to her consent is but a part. Yeah, kind of like to not necessarily ask her permission, but to kind of like to woo her means to like kind of like, you know, romance her, right? Try to like win her over. So typically in this time period, this is very unusual. A father would really not care that much what his daughter wanted in a marriage situation. But Lord Capulet tells us, the earth hath swallowed all my hopes but she. So he's saying that all of his other children have died, and she's the only living one left. So that might be kind of why he. It's just there's not like a class. There's no class code. She just needs to go.
She said she's in where you put the person's name in, or the student's name or something like that.
That's what I mean, she shouldn't have to do anything, like, she doesn't have to do a class code or anything, she just creates her own set in her own account.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah. So he is going to, he tries to give her a little more choice in the matter because she's his only living daughter, so, you know, he kind of has like a soft spot for her. So on your answer, on your study guide, you have number 1, what suit does Paris bring to Capulet? And that's to marry Juliet. And then number 2, how old is she? 13. And what are her father's thoughts about allowing her to marry? He wants her to have a say, and he wants to wait. Okay. Okay. So we are at line 20 on page 1047. Capulet is going to now talk about how he's having a party, and he's going to invite Paris to come to the party in hopes that Paris might see another beautiful young lady and sort of take his affections elsewhere. Capulet doesn't really want Paris to marry Juliet just because, you know, like we said, she's so young. You know, she's kind of like his baby, so he doesn't want to see her married off yet.
This night I hold an old accustomed feast, whereto I have invited many a guest, such as I love. And you among the store, one more most welcome makes my number more. At my poor house look to behold this night earth-treading stars that make dark heaven light. Such comfort as do lusty young men feel when well apparelled April on the heel of winter treads. Even such delight among fresh female buds shall you this night inherit at my house. Hear all see, and like her most, whose merit most shall be, which on more view of many, mine being one, may stand in number, though in reckoning none. Come, go with me. Go, Sarah, trudge about through fair Verona, find those persons out whose names are written there, and to them say, my house, and welcome on their pleasure stay.
Find them out whose names are written here. It is written that the shoemaker should meddle with his yard, and the tailor with his last, the fisher with his pencil, and the painter with his nets. But I am set to find those persons whose names are here writ, and can never find what names the writing person hath here writ. I must to the learned. A good time.
Okay, so Lord Capulet says, hey, I'm having a party tonight. You should come, right? He talks about the fresh female buds shall you this night inherit at my house. So he's saying like all the most beautiful girls in Verona will be there, and you can compare them to Juliet and you can see what you think, right? Is Juliet really the one that you want to marry? And then he gives this list to his servant, okay? A list of people to invite to this party, and tells his servant to go out and invite these people. The servant says, find them out whose names are written here. And then he kind of goes through these like different craftsmen and their tools, but kind of mixes them up. And then he says, I am sent to find those persons whose names are here writ, and can never find what names the writing person hath here writ. I must to the learned, so like to the educated. So what is the servant's issue here? Why can he not go find these people? Use your footnotes. I will tell you in the footnotes. Yeah. Good, he can't read, okay? So he's saying like the shoemaker should meddle with his yard, the painter with his nets, right? So he's saying like, like a painter might as well like have nets like a fisherman, right? Like he's confusing these things, saying like that he's useless, right? Like what use would nets be to a painter, or fabric to a shoemaker, and so on. So he can't read. So that is his issue here. And luckily for him, or not, Romeo and Benvolio are coming down the street at this time. So Romeo and Benvolio are just still kind of on this same conversation of how Romeo should look at other girls, should find someone new to like, and get over this person that he's been in love with. So we are at the top of page 1048.
Hot man, one fire burns out, another's burning. One pain is lessened by another's anguish. Turn giddy and we hope by backward turning. One desperate grief cures with another's languish. Take thou some new infection to thy eye, and the rank poison of the old will die.
Your planted leaf is excellent for that.
For what, I pray thee?
For your broken shin.
Why, Romeo, art thou mad?
Not mad, but now more than a madman is. Shut up in prison, kept without my food, whipped and tormented, and good end, good fellow. God gave you then. I pray, sir, can you read? Aye, mine own fortune in my misery, and perhaps you have learned it without book, but I pray. Can you read anything you see? Aye, if I know the letters and the language. Ye say honestly, rest ye merry. Stay, fellow, I can read. Signor Martino and his wife and daughters, Count Anselmo and his beauteous sisters, the lady widow of Retruvio, Signor Placentio and his lovely nieces, Mercutio and his brother Valentine, mine uncle Capulet, his wife and daughters, my fair niece Rosaline and Livia, Signor Valentio and his cousin Tybalt, Lucio and the lively Helena. A fair assembly. Whither should they come? Whither? To supper to our house. Whose house? McMaster's. Indeed, I should have asked you that before.
Now I'll tell you without asking. My master is the great rich Capulet, and if you be not in the house of Montague, I pray, come and crush a cup of wine. Rest you merry.
Okay, so the servant can't read. Romeo and Benvolio come in. Benvolio is still just talking about, find a new girl. And the servant asks them if they can read. Romeo kind of messes with the servant here, like he doesn't give him a direct answer. This would be another example of like a humorous exchange, right? That like the Shakespearean audience would have like really gotten a kick out of this. And then finally Romeo says, yes, I can read. And he reads off the list and asks the servant like, what is this list for, right? And the servant kind of spills the beans that there's going to be this party and says, my master is Capulet, and if you're not a Montague, then you should come to this party. Okay, so they weren't really meant to be invited to the party, but they find out about it from the servant asking them to read this invitation. Okay, a couple notable people there on the list. Mercutio is someone who is friends with Romeo and Benvolio, but is also friendly with the Capulets, so he's invited to the party, so he's gonna kind of go with them. As well as Rosaline, who is the woman that Romeo is in love with. Okay, so she is going to be at this party. Okay, so make sure I'm not skipping anything. Okay, so Benvolio in this last part of the scene is going to try to convince Romeo that they should crash the party.
At this same ancient feast of Capulets sups the fair Rosaline, whom thou so lovest, with all the admired beauties of her own. Go thither, and with unattainted eye compare her face with some that I shall show, and I will make thee think thy swan and a crow.
When the devout religion of mine eye maintains such falsehood, then turn tears to fires, and these who often drowned could never die, transparent heretics, be burnt for liars. One fairer than my love? The all-seeing sun ne'er saw her match since first the world begun.
Tut! You saw her fair, none else being by, herself poised with herself in either eye. But in that crystal scales let there be weighed your lady's love against some other maid that I will show you shining at this feast, and she shall scant show well that now shows best.
I'll go along, no such sight to be shown, but to rejoice in splendor of mine own.
Okay, so Benvolio says, hey, at this party, Rosaline's gonna be there. That's who you love. And so why don't you go? And then we can compare her, right? There's gonna be all these beautiful girls there. You can compare Rosaline to the other girls. Romeo says there's like no way that anyone will be as beautiful, right? In line 93, he says, the all-seeing sun ne'er saw her match since first the world begun. So he's saying like, there's never been a more beautiful woman in all of history. What kind of figurative language is that? Hyperbole, right? This is an exaggeration, right? I mean, maybe she's the most beautiful woman. I don't know, but it's kind of subjective, and he hasn't seen every woman that's ever existed, so we can call that hyperbole, okay? Benvolio points out, like, you saw her by herself, so you thought she was beautiful. There was no one to compare her to. But let's compare her to people, and I think that you'll see that she's not as beautiful. Romeo then says, I'll go along, no such sight to be shown, but to rejoice in splendor of mine own. So he says, yes, I'll go to the party, but I'm only going to see Rosaline, right? I don't believe that there's going to be someone more beautiful. Okay, so for number 4, Benvolio wants to crash the party so that Romeo can see other girls. And Romeo agrees to go. but only to see Rosaline. Okay. We've also got some really good alliteration there in line 98 that I will show you shining at this feast. And she shall scant show well that now shows best. All those S's. So that's alliteration. Okay, so that is the end of this scene. So we need to write a summary. So what's the first important thing that happens in this scene? Good. Paris asks to marry Juliet. What else? What else is important? Okay. Okay, Campbell thinks she's too young. And what's the last important thing from this scene? Romeo and Benvolio find out about a party at Capulet. Okay. All right. Scene 3 takes place at Capulet's house. We're going to see Juliet, Lady Capulet, and the nurse. The nurse is an interesting character. So this play is a tragedy, and a lot of very dramatic things happen. The nurse is one of two characters who really provides a lot of comic relief. Okay, so she is supposed to be like a funny character. She just kind of helps break the tension as we get later into this into the play. Her relationship to Juliet is something that we don't really see all that often in modern society. But back in this time period, right, 1500s and before, if you were a noble person, a noble woman particularly, and you had a child, you would not nurse your own child, okay? You would have what's called a wet nurse who would be someone who had a baby around the same time as you and can nurse your child for you because like you're wealthy, you know, you don't have to do things like that, right? So the nurse is not like a medical nurse. She's a wet nurse who basically raised Juliet, okay, from the time that she was born until now when she's 13, kind of like a second mother, like a nanny, but even closer relationship than like a typical nanny. So Juliet probably confides in the nurse more and is closer to the nurse than she is to her own mother. The nurse is a servant, right? So she is not wealthy, not noble, not educated, and she makes a lot of like inappropriate jokes and like tells inappropriate stories, and she's just kind of this comic relief. And a lot of the stuff that she says like doesn't really make as much sense to us in a modern society, but at the time, like audiences would have just been dying laughing over the crazy stuff that she says, and she kind of never stops talking. So, okay, so let's go ahead and start scene 3. And they're just basically going to be talking about Lady Capulet is going to try to find out if Juliet's interested in Paris at all.
Scene 3. Capulet's house.
Nurse, where's my daughter? Call her forth to me.
Now by my maidenhead 12-year-old, I bade her come. What lamb? What ladybird? God forbid, what's this girl? What, Juliet? How now, who calls? Your mother.
Madam, I am here. What is your will? This is the matter. Nurse, give me the wine. We must talk in secret. Nurse, come back again. I have remembered thee. Thou hear our counsel. Thou knowest my daughter's of a pretty age.
Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
I'll lay 14 of my teeth, and yet to my teen being spoken I have but 4. She's not 14. How long is it now to Lamb's time?
A fortnight in odd days.
Even or odd, of all days in the year, from Lamb's Eve at night shall she be 14. Susan, she promised all Christian souls were an age. Susan is with God, she is too good from me. But as I said, on Lamb's Eve at night shall she be 14. That shall she marry and well. Since the earthquake now 11 years, and she was weaned, I never shall forget of all the days of the year upon that day. For I had been made wormwood to my dove, sitting in the sun under the dove house wall. My lord and you were then at Mantua. Nay, I do bear brain. But as I said, when it takes the wormwood on the nipple of my dove, and felt it bitter, pretty fool to see it tetchy and fall out with the dove. Shake of the dove house, 'twas no need I trow to bid me trudge. And since that time it is 11 years, for then she could stand alone. Nay, by the moon she could have run and waddled all about. Or even the day before, she broke her brow, and then my husband, God be of his soul, was a married man, took up the child. Yea, quoth he, dost thou fall upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backward when thou hast more wit. Wilt thou not, Jewel? And upon my holiday, the pretty wretch left crying, and said, I, to see now how a jest shall come about. I warranted I should live 1,000 years, I never shall forget it. Wilt thou not, Jewel? Quoth he, and pretty fool stinted, and said, I.
Oh my gosh. So the nurse never stops talking, right? Like literally all Lady Capulet said was like, you know that my daughter's almost 14, right? And then the nurse just like launches into this whole thing, right? About like her baby who died and how old she is, and then telling this embarrassing story about Juliet when she fell and hit her head when she was young. Just on and on. She never stops, okay? Lady Capulet is going to try and be like, okay, stop talking now. And the nurse is going to continue. She just thinks that this story about Juliet is the funniest thing and cannot stop retelling it. Okay, so it's just that like Juliet fell, she was really young, she hit her head, and then the nurse's husband was like, you'll fall the other direction when you're older. And then Juliet, being like a little kid, was like, yeah. And so like she just thinks that's the funniest thing in the world, and so keeps on telling the story over and over again. So if you ever have like an aunt or someone in your family who like always loves to tell an embarrassing story about you from your childhood, that's like the nurse, right? Just won't shut up about it. All right, bottom of page 1051.
Enough of this. I pray thee hold thy peace.
Yes, madam. Yet I cannot choose but laugh to think it should be pride, and say I. And yet I will have upon its brow a bump as big as a young cockerel stone, a perilous knock, and it cried bitterly. Yea, quoth my husband, fall'st upon thy face. Thou wilt fall backward when thou comest to age. Wilt thou not, Jewel? It stinted, and said I.
And stint thou too, I pray thee, nurse, say I.
Peace I have done. God mark thee to his grace. Thou wast the prettiest babe that e'er I nursed. And I might live to see thee married once. I have my wish.
Mary, that Mary is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married?
It is an honor that I dream not of. An honor, were not I thine only nurse, I would say thou hadst sucked wisdom from thy teeth.
Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. Thus then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love.
A man, young lady, such a man as all the world, why he's a man of wax.
Verona's summer hath not such a flower.
Nay, he's a flower in faith, a very flower.
What say you, can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. Read o'er the volume of young Paris's face, and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every several lineament, and see how one another lends contempt. And what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margin of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and 'tis much pride for fair without the fair within to hide. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory, that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all that he doth possess, by having him making yourself no less.
Okay, so Lady Capulet says, what do you think about getting married? Up in line 66. Juliet says, it's an honor that I dream not of. So she really hasn't thought about it, which is fair. She's 13. Although some people in her time did get married then, she really hasn't thought that much about it. And then Lady Capulet says that Paris is seeking, your love, basically. Does Lady Capulet want Juliet to love Paris? A, no, she tells Juliet she shouldn't judge a book by its cover. B, yes, she says Paris is a gorgeous book and Juliet will be the cover. Or C, yes, he's very educated with a bachelor's degree in English literature. What's the correct answer? B is the correct answer, right? She goes through this whole extended metaphor, in which she refers to Paris as a book. So she says, that the margins of his eyes, this precious book of love, all of these things, right, to beautify him only lacks a cover. So she's comparing Paris to a beautiful book that just needs a cover, and that cover would be Juliet. So B is the correct answer for number 1. Okay. And then she's going to ask what Juliet thinks. Will she agree to meet Paris?
Oh, less nay, bigger women grow by men.
Speak briefly. Can you like of Paris's love? I look to like if looking liking move. But no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly.
Madam, the guests are come, supper served up, you called, my young lady asked for, the nurse cursed in the pantry, and everything in extremity. I must hence to wait, I beseech you, follow straight.
We follow thee. Juliet, the county stay.
Go, girl, seek happy nights to happy days.
Okay, so what's Juliet's response? Her mother says, can you like of Paris's love? So is Juliet agreeing to consider Paris, or does she say no? She says, I'll look to like if looking liking move, but no more deep will I dart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. So will she look at Paris? Yes or no? What does it mean? I'll look to like if looking liking move. In your footnotes, it says, I'll look at him with the intention of liking him, if simply looking can make me like him. So she agrees, right, that she will consider Paris. She will look at Paris. So what does this tell us about Juliet? She says that she's never really thought about marriage yet, but her mom asks her to consider this person and she agrees. What does that kind of tell us about her? Does she want to make her parents happy? Does she follow their directions? What does it tell us about her? She cares what her parents think, right? She is a dutiful daughter, right? Like she does what she's asked. Oops. So that is the end of scene 3. The servant comes in, tells them they need to come to the party, and then they leave. Okay? So you need to write a summary for scene 3. So try on your own to write a summary. You could probably do it in 2 sentences, maybe even 1. And then we'll go through and see what people wrote. So if you're struggling, you can do one together. This one's pretty easy to summarize. Okay, so how can we summarize this scene? What happens that is important that we need to remember? Okay. So Juliet's mom tells her that Paris wants to marry her. And I would say that then the rest of the summary could just be as simple as Juliet agrees to meet him. Right? That's pretty much it. We meet the nurse, but as far as things that move the plot forward, that's pretty much it. All right. So we're gonna hop into scene 4. This takes place on a street near the Capulet house. So it is now evening, okay? So we'll kind of work on filling out like a timeline as we go, but basically the fight happened in the morning. They get invited to the party by accident in the afternoon, and then the party is that night. So now it's night. It's they're going to basically like a mask, which is like a costume ball. So they're all wearing like masks that cover their, their eyes at least. And they're all carrying torches, right? It's dark out, so they've got like torches to light their way. Romeo and Benvolio and Mercutio are walking along towards the party. Their masks help them to be, hidden. They aren't going to be recognized as Montagues. Mercutio and Benvolio, they're ready to party. They're in a great mood, but Romeo is still like sad and depressed, okay? And he has had a bad dream about the party, and so that is also kind of messing with him. So we will see how these 3 interact on their way to the party. And we will meet Mercutio. This is the first time that we have actually met him in the play.
Scene 4. The street near the Capulet house.
What, shall the speech be spoke for our excuse, or shall we on without apology?
The date is out of such prolixity. We'll have no Cupid hoodwinked with a scarf, bearing a Tartar's painted bow of lath, scaring the ladies like a crow keeper. nor know without book prologue faintly spoke after the prompter for our entrance. But let them measure us by what they will. We'll measure them and measure and be gone.
Give me a torch. I am not for this ambling. Being but heavy, I will bear the light.
Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance.
Not I. Believe me, you have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground, I cannot move.
You are a lover. Borrow Cupid's wings and soar with them above a common bound.
I am to soar and pierce it with his shaft, to soar with his light feathers. And so bound, I cannot bound to pitch above dull woe. Under love's heavy burden do I sink.
And to sink in it, should you burden love. Too great oppression for a tender thing.
Is love a tender thing? It is too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorn.
If love be rough with you, be rough with love. Prick love for pricking, and you beat love down. Give me a case to put my visage in, a visor for a visor. What care I what curious eye doth poke deformities? Here are the beetle brows shall blush for me.
Come, knock and enter, and no sooner in, but every man betaken to his legs.
A torch for me? Let wantons light apart tickle the senseless rushes with their heels. For I am proverb with the grandsire phrase, I'll be a candle holder and look on. The game was ne'er so fair, and I am done.
Tut, done's the mouse, the constable's own word. If thou art done, we'll draw thee from the mire of, save your reverence, love, wherein thou stickst up to the ears. Come, we burn daylight, oh.
Nay, that's not so.
I mean, sir, in delay, we waste our lights in vain, like lamps by day. Take our good meaning, for our judgment sits 5 times in that, ere once in our 5 wits.
Okay, so let's stop there. So we've talked several times about how the first thing that a character says tells us a lot about their character, first few things they say. So Romeo's trying to be like sad, right? He's like, give me a torch. So he's like, I'll just hold the torch for you guys while you guys have fun, right? Being super sad. And Mercutio says, nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance, right? He's like excited, like, no, you're gonna come and have fun with us. And when Romeo says that he can't, he has a soul of lead, Mercutio says, you're a lover, borrow Cupid's wings and soar with them above a common bound. So what kind of person does Mercutio seem to be? Energetic, and he's very positive, right? He's very goofy too. So he is going to be another character that's going to provide comic relief throughout the play. He is always being silly, not taking things seriously. He speaks in a lot of puns. So when you see Mercutio, you're going to see puns a lot. Remember, that's a play on words. And you already see a couple here in this scene. Lines 11 and 12 is a pun. In line 15, there's a pun, right? Souls and soul, we talked about that one in your notes. So yeah, Mercutio is very positive. Romeo's not having any of it, right? He's still like sad and depressed. And he's like anxious about this party. Okay, so what do we call it when two characters are the opposites of each other? In your notes from the other day. One character's characteristics are the exact opposite of the others. That's when you've got a contradictory phrase. So you're on the right track. This is more when the characters are acting. One character traits highlight the other character's traits. So these are a foil. Okay, so when Mercutio, everything that Romeo says is sad and bummed out, and everything that he says, Mercutio comes back with something that's like, come on, it's not that bad, like, and joking around. So Mercutio's like energy and positivity and like humor really highlights like what a wet blanket Romeo is being, right? Because he's just like, "Oh, everything's terrible, okay? So these two are foils of each other in this scene. We have also seen foils with Tybalt and Benvolio, right? Because Benvolio is peaceful and Tybalt is aggressive and a fighter. Okay. So in this next scene, Romeo is going to say that he doesn't think it's a good idea to go to this party because he's had a bad dream. He's had a dream that something bad is going to happen as a result of this party. Like this party is going to set things in motion that will have a disastrous result. Okay. As a result of him being like sad and saying that he thinks that there's something bad that's going to happen, Mercutio is going to go on this rant about Queen Mab. And so this next section, it's a very famous speech by Mercutio. The Queen Mab speech is probably one of the most famous speeches from this play. Don't worry about understanding every single word like we've talked about, okay? And keep in mind that Mercutio's goal is always to be funny and to be like outrageous and ridiculous. So he like really kind of gets going and like takes off in this crazy imagining that he's having. So your questions are going to ask you who or what is Queen Mab and what does she do? That's all that I really need you to take from this passage. But, you know, just try to catch what you can. Maybe.
And we mean well in going to this mass, but 'tis no whit to go.
Why, may one ask?
I dreamt a dream tonight.
And so did I.
Well, what was yours?
That dreamers often lie.
In bed asleep while they do dream things true.
Oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. She is the fairy's midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little acme athwart men's noses as they lie asleep. Her wagon spokes made of long spinner's legs, the cover of the wings of grasshoppers. Her traces as small as spider's web. Her collars of the moonshine's watery beams. Her whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film. Her wagoner, a small gray-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut made by the joiner squirrel or old grub. Time out of mind the fairy's coachmakers. And in this state she gallops night by night through lovers' brains. And then they dream of love. Or courtiers' knees that dream on curtsies straight. Or lawyers' fingers who straight dream on fees. Or ladies' lips who straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry Mab with blisters plagues, because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometimes she gallops o'er a courtier's nose, and then dreams he of smelling out a suit. And sometimes comes she with a tied pig's tail, tickling a parson's nose as he lies asleep. Then dreams he of another benefice. Sometimes she driveth o'er a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breeches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of healths 5 fathom deep. And then anon drums in his ear, at which he starts and wakes, and being thus frightened, swears a prayer or two and sleeps again. This is that very Mab that plaits the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul sluttish hairs, which once untangled much misfortune bodes. This is the hag, when maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them first to bear, making them women of good carriage. This is she.
Okay, so Mercutio. All right, so he is talking about Queen Mab and who or what is she? You might need to use the footnote on the bottom of page 1054. So who is Queen Mab? She's a folklore character. So she's queen of the fairies in like folklore that would have been common in Shakespearean time. So, you know, I don't know, like we have like the tooth fairy, right, in our like culture today, in our folklore. So she is queen of the fairies. And what does she do? In line 70, it says, and in this state she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love over a courtier's knees that dream on curtsies straight. So it's saying all of these things. She does things to different people and causes them to have dreams. So she's basically like, she brings people dreams. And then the whole rest of the speech is him giving examples of, you know, she goes to this person, and if they've done this, then she gives them this dream. And if they've done this, then she gives them that dream. Okay. So she brings people dreams. Okay. So you'll see like it talks in line like 75, it talks about how like if somebody has bad breath, then she'll give them like a blister on their mouth while they're sleeping, and have them dream of, you know, kissing someone, but then they wake up with a blister, like different things. So it just goes through all these different like people and the dreams that she brings to them. Okay. That's really all you need to know. It's a very long like speech. It's just the purpose is really what you want to know, and the purpose is that it's supposed to make Romeo feel better.
Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace. Thou talkst of nothing.
True, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain, god of nothing but vain fantasy, which is as thin of substance as the air, and more inconstant than the wind, who woos even now the bosom of the north, and being angered, puffs away from thence, turning his face to the dewdropping south.
This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done, and we shall come too late.
I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence. Yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels, and expire the term of a despised life, closed in my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my safe. On, lusty gentlemen.
Strike drum.
Okay, so Mercutio is like going off about all these like dreams that Queen Mab brings to people. And Romeo finally cuts him off and he says, peace, peace, Mercutio, thou talks of nothing, right? So he's saying like, you're not talking, like nothing that you're saying is real. And Mercutio at the bottom of page 1056 says, true, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain, begot of nothing but vain fantasy. So Mercutio is kind of like, yeah, I know. Like, so why are you so hung up on this dream that you had, right? Because Romeo started this whole thing by saying like that he had a bad dream about this night. And Mercutio is trying to point out that dreams don't mean anything. Dreams are meaningless, right? But Romeo still is hung up on this. In line 106, he says, my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars, shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels. So he's saying that he thinks that something bad is going to happen, like basically going to this party will set in motion something bad. So something bad might not happen at the party, but it's going to set something in motion, right? It's like a chain of events that then is going to have a bad result, okay? So for question number 2, why is Romeo reluctant to go to the party with his friends? Basically, he just had a dream that something bad will happen. Okay, and this would be a great example of dramatic irony, right? We know that something bad will happen. He's gonna kill himself, right? And so is Juliet, but the characters don't know, right? So it has an extra layer of meaning for us because we know what's going to happen as the audience. Characters don't know. And then number 3, what is the purpose of Mercutio's Queen Mab speech? So we just kind of talked about this, but basically the speech is to cheer Romeo up. And point out that dreams are meaningless. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of running out of room there. Okay. Any questions about scene 4? Okay, so go ahead and try to write a summary of scene 4. Again, probably only like a couple of sentences will do, and then we'll go over it together. Get out of here so I got some space. Okay, so what happens in this scene that we need to remember? What are they doing in this scene? Where are they going? Okay, so Romeo and his friends walk to the Capulet party. Why is Romeo anxious about the party? He had a bad dream. Romeo had a bad dream and thinks it's a bad idea to go. That's pretty much it, right? I mean, he still goes with them, right? So, I don't know. Personally, I think this kind of goes back to the idea of Romeo being very dramatic. Like, if you truly had that bad of a dream to where you really thought that something terrible was going to happen, like, just don't go. But he's still like, oh, whatever, let's go. So, I don't know. He's the worst, but it's fine. Okay. So we're going to stop there for today. We will finish scene 5 when we come back from Thanksgiving break. Just want to remind you and encourage you to please get your essay turned in. Pretty please, so that I can grade them. And as well as any other missing work that you might have. I would say still turn in your paragraphs, you know, like paragraph by paragraph. And I can still try to give you feedback, but like, if you've been waiting and I haven't given you any feedback, just like go ahead and submit your essay. You can always resubmit your essay if you need to, if there's a big problem, but don't just use like, oh, well, you didn't give me feedback as an excuse to not turn your work in. Like, you still are responsible for turning in your work. So make sure that you do that. But I have been still giving feedback on